Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness. Adapted from the novelisation by J.R. Millward. Based on an original story by A. Murty Schofield. With J.R. Millward and Adam Coover. With music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Episode 10.
It's amazing how even the comfiest seats can turn, without any prompting, into devices of torture. The assassin's vehicle was some kind of converted Plymouth Reliant estate. Old, but lovingly modified and as well equipped as I could wish for. Air conditioning, GPS, even one of those dinky little holders for coffee. It had everything. Its seats were like padded marshmallows, deliciously hugging my every contour. The engine purred like an athletic cheetah, scorning my paltry 80 miles an hour. Thanks to the benevolence of the Union's border treaties, I did not have to stop and answer awkward questions as I crossed through Germany and the Czech Republic. It was a relief not to have to produce my passport. Quite apart from my status as a wanted murderer, I get touchy about people ogling my photograph. My expression suggests that I've caught Winston dancing the hornpipe in my underwear. The old car assisted me in other ways too. Its roomy interior made for a moderately comfortable nest, but its custom-tinted windows also granted merciful privacy. My last break had been just south of Mannheim, over 4 hours ago. I'd pulled into a concrete-walled lay-by, eaten cold, roadside food bought from an anonymous vendor back in Luxembourg, and all but collapsed on the back seat. My urgency to reach Prague lost out to prudence. I had no desire to end up in a ditch because of sleep deprivation. I'd awoken at around noon, grunting as I tried to sit up. I felt as stiff as though I'd spent the entire night in traction, and my skin was blotchy with scarlet and purple bruises, most of which I couldn't remember getting. Some painkillers from Werner's first aid kit and a few stretching exercises eased the worst of the aches. With a practised eye, I checked my gear, bypassing a torn belt here and substituting a new buckle there. Bouchard's hitman had packed the car with enough supplies to keep me soldiering on for another month, let alone get me the 550 miles to Prague. However, almost 15 hours after setting out from Paris, the luxurious driver's seat had transformed into a sack full of rocks beneath my buttocks. The weather had also deteriorated as I drove east. I peered through the clean crescents on the sleet-splattered windscreen, squinting at the road signs as they flashed past in a blur, praying that my journey would soon be over. Even though it was only about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the March skies had darkened and night was closing in with a curtain of worsening snow. I felt troubled, and not just for the obvious reasons. During my meticulous double-checking, a crystalline object had slipped from my backpack. The same item that had been dropped by my mysterious stalker outside the Louvre. I'd examined it in astonishment, hardly believing that I'd forgotten picking it up. Superficially, it resembled a dagger, perhaps a Yemeni jambia, or curved Persian blade, about half as long again as my hand. I traced a finger along its inside curve, drawing a line of blood finer than a human hair along my skin. The black, oddly gleaming blade was sharper than the finest Japanese steel and colder than mere glass or crystal had any right to feel. It seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The blade portion morphed seamlessly into a milky white handle, ridged to give a decent grip, and flowering at the pommel, into an angelic face. Its expression met mine with infinite serenity and seemed to counter the unease I felt in its presence. I couldn't convince myself that this was something shaped by human hands. It didn't look made. It looked grown. I also couldn't shake the feeling it was watching me. Werner's notebook was only marginally helpful. Whilst ironing out the rumpled engravings and slipping them between the journal's pages for safekeeping, I'd found several references to the periapt shards. Supposedly 3 crystalline weapons of light, said to be in the hands of the Lux Veritatis. Over the years, I've learnt that when it comes to nuances of language, one person's vase can be another culture's chamber pot. I dismissed Werner's nomenclature as unreliable at best, misleading at worst. The artifact in my hand certainly didn't look much like the spearheads the shards were said to resemble. Come to that, the stranger hadn't looked like much of a Lux Veritatis knight either. Is that what you think he was? The circumstances are suggestive. Trailing us through Paris, his professional skills, knowledge of the painting and our role in getting it. He knew what we were doing, perhaps before we even saw him in Café Metro. Then there are his telekinetic powers, his possession of what appears to be a periapt shard. Sexy eyes, athletic body. Enough! Get back on topic. Just carrying a periapt shard does not make him a Lux Veritatis. For all we know, he could just be another mercenary, or someone else working for Eckhart. And if you're going to be preoccupied with this crush, perhaps I'll pull into a hospital and ask for a lobotomy. He could too easily be an enemy. Well, I'll admit it even if you won't. You are attracted to him, at my level, the deepest part of your mind. Why else would we be preoccupied with him? I recall already mentioning that my subconscious and I don't always see eye to eye. Look, perhaps you've forgotten that he stole my obscure painting. He's not interested in making friends when he can just take what he wants. Now be quiet. I need to concentrate, and that means no distractions. Dear Lara, are you really going to be so defensive all your life? Open your eyes. In the desert, you found a new source of strength. Me. I've always been here, and you can always trust me, knowing I've got our best interests at heart. But your heart is also a source of strength you haven't embraced yet. You've always been the loner. Yet this man appeals to you because he proved himself our equal. You're saying I should just trust him. I'm saying that you shouldn't close yourself off from the possibility. Whether you want to admit it or not, you are a human being, and a woman. He's obviously resourceful and more than capable of looking after himself. If it becomes possible to work together, you need to take that chance. In the present circumstances, we need all the friends and allies we can get. And who knows? He might even be single. Perhaps I was going crazy after all. The GPS beeped just as I pulled into an open square in Newtown. The cobblestones, parked cars, and silent fountain were already under a foot of snow. Icicles, thick as my wrist, dangled from the fountain's bowl. Quaintly wrought street lamps twinkled through the swirling snowflakes, almost as though they'd been plucked from that famous snowbound forest on the other side of the wardrobe. Prague's buildings were works of art. A humble bakery was given the same attention as any grand cathedral. At any other time, I would have appreciated its urban beauty. As I killed the ignition, however, I began to revise my earlier opinion. The square and the buildings seemed to shrink as the snow came down heavier, as though someone was slowly turning down the contrast and filtering my view through panes of smoky purple glass. The street lamps' luminescence grew hushed as the near-invisible snowflakes swirled into sudden clarity around their glowing halos, like swarms of dark moths. I sat there, listening to the soft pattering on the roof while the windscreen grew a speckled coating. My attention zeroed in on the grandest building on the far side of the square. Vast windows of exquisite stained glass made up most of its frontage, and reams of familiar police tape crisscrossed its entrance. I'd come to the right place. As my gaze roamed, I spotted a red car, a shabby 1980s Skoda, and the only vehicle free from snow, that was parked nonchalantly across the street from Vasily's house. Its owner was standing with the door open and nursed a steaming paper cup while he made notes on a pad propped on the car's roof. He wore a beige jacket too short to be called a trench coat, a shirt with the top button undone so that his black tie hung at a skewed angle, dark trousers, and an ageing fedora that cast his face into shadow. There were brownish stains on his shirt, and the hems of his trousers were getting soaked in the deepening snow. He kept glancing at the building and jotting things down, even taking a camera out and snapping off a few surreptitious photos. Even at this distance, there was something about him that just didn't fit with an official investigator. It wasn't late, but he was the only person around. Time to make inquiries. I'd found a long yew-green coat in the boot that had served as my blanket during my morning nap. It made a satisfying swishing noise and billowed theatrically, but more importantly, kept me warm and my weapons concealed from casual view. A little cold to be standing around.
English. You're enjoying our weather, no?
I've had better. Do you know anything about that building over there?
Yeah, what?
That one. Big thing with snow on it.
Beat it. I'm busy.
On an important case, are we?
Yes, actually. I'm a reporter. You didn't hear on the radio? There's been another one of the monstrum killings, right here.
Is that a fact? Well, my radio broke, so I'm short on a few details. What happened in there exactly?
You want information, lady? It'll cost you. Or you can just wait for the morning edition.
Oh, I can pay. I need that information, and I'm willing to pay for, say, the 7 p.m. edition.
What the hell? Why not? Ask your questions.
I gather this Vasily was some kind of art dealer.
You know the victim's name, then? Yes, he was. But more than that, he was involved with the mafia.
Mafia? What makes you think so?
Lady, I know so. I've been following Vasily's activities for quite some time. He was, how did the English say, up to his neck in it.
Tell me why he was murdered, then.
Simple. He found something they wanted and got smashed because he tried to hang on to it. Not very clever. They sent a monstrum on him.
He found something? Do you know what it was? A painting, perhaps?
I don't know about that, but he was definitely silenced. The mafia tidied away all the evidence before the police got here. Took it to the Strahov.
Now you're going to tell me what the Strahov is, aren't you?
Nope. Your credit just ran out.
The money hasn't dried up just yet. You can keep talking.
It's not that. This is dangerous stuff, I'm telling you. I shouldn't be shooting off my mouth.
You're a big boy. I'm sure you can handle it. Tell me your name.
Luddick. Thomas Luddick.
Okay, Luddick. What else can you tell me about the Strahov?
Well, the Strahov is the mafia center of operations in Prague. There's been a lot of activity there recently, much more than usual.
You're obviously well informed.
Informed? I'm a professional. It's my business to know these things. I've gathered dossiers on all the main players. It'll cost you.
Okay. You call these dossiers?
Lady, you tried doing better under these conditions. They don't make it easy. See there, that's Dr. Grant Mueller. He runs a pharmaceutical business out of Rome, but not for any drugs you'd buy over the counter. That one is Boaz, Christina Boaz. I think she was working in Argentina when she got those scars. I've linked her to the Strahov Psychiatric Institute, where she's listed as a surgeon. But there's no record of where she trained or what her specialism is. Lothar Ruzik hardly ever leaves the Strahov, so it's been difficult to get any information on him. I think he used to work at the Municipal Prague Archives. The man with the blonde hair is Dr. Joachim Karel. He's a lawyer, with investments, as you English would say, left, right, and center. He's the second in command, as far as I can tell.
Doubts were starting to puddle in my stomach. These people certainly didn't feel like any mafia figureheads I'd ever encountered, and I was in the rare position to speak from personal experience. Ludwig, do you know who that is?
No, he arrived this morning. He was at the Strahov, so I thought I'd take a couple of...
That's Bouchard. He's a Parisian gang boss I ran into over a personal matter.
Really? Is he Paris Mafia then?
No idea. Wait, what do you mean, this morning?
He arrived this morning. Oh, about 6, 7 o'clock. Why? You sound surprised.
It's nothing. I'd seen Bouchard in person less than half an hour before I set out for Prague at, near as make no difference, 3 o'clock in the morning, Paris time. How could he have gotten here so quickly? Paris to Prague in less than 3 hours by car? Impossible.
Well, there's only Gunderson and Eckhart left. I linked Gunderson to a mercenary outfit a few years ago, but all my evidence got shredded when my colleagues sprinkled my office without permission. He's always in Eckhart's shadow. I think he's his bodyguard nowadays. Eckhart's the top mafia guy, from what I can make out, but I know less about him than the others.
I had to swallow the urge to recoil. I recognized Gunderson. Even in such a poor quality photograph, his gigantic frame stood out, no pun intended, alongside that same dispassionate stare that had so chilled my veins in the Louvre. He'd been the one pursuing me, only to be thwarted by the Tibetan gong. But Gunderson was the least of my worries. The photograph labelled Eckhart showed a man of medium build and height, wearing superbly tailored, if eccentric, clothing. His hair was knotted back into a ponytail, and his eyes were all but concealed behind smoked glasses. His right hand was held up as though acknowledging someone, a hand that was covered in bandage-like strips of cloth and riveted leather in clumsy imitation of a glove. I knew him instantly. Eckhart was the monstrum. The monstrum was Eckhart.
They're all gathered at the Strahov at the moment.
Hang on. You mean they're all in the Strahov? Right now?
Lady, I've been watching them very carefully, and I assure you, all 6 of them are in there as we speak.
Ludwig, I have to get in there. Today. How would you manage it?
Well, it wouldn't be easy. The place is heavily guarded. They've got security gates, cameras, ident scanners.
But
I could get an access code. I have contacts. It'll take me half an hour.
Okay. While you're on your errand, I'm going to start with Vasily's.
What do you mean, with Vasily's? You're not going in there, are you?
Luddick, please don't complicate things. You're already in deeper than you should be. We're talking way, way past your neck.
Lady, I can take care of myself. But, look, if I get this code, I want the exclusive story of events in Paris and whatever you find in the Strahov. You can pay me for the dossiers when you come out.
Fine. Deal.
Lady, be careful in there. And don't keep me waiting. It's just not healthy to hang around on the streets, especially in weather like this.
He stamped his feet, drawing his coat tightly around him, and for a moment I detected real concern. Smug and inquisitive Luddick may be, but he knew enough to urge caution. I was also familiar enough with how men reacted around me to note a tarnished hint of chivalry lurking in the reporter's natty little soul. I nodded to him and trudged towards Vasily's cordoned-off house. A moment later, Luddick's ancient Skoda coughed into life, leaving me alone in the square. It began to snow even harder. As Luddick's car sped away, I found myself keeping to the shadows as I edged closer to the late art dealer's house. The front door, overlooking the square, was an obvious no-no. Even as I slipped down a side alley, I spotted a lone policeman saunter across the street. A handgun glared from his holster, and a large Alsatian padded along beside him, leaving a rough-edged channel in the snow. They didn't appear to notice me. I kept my head down. The best I could hope for was a back door or a window that I could scramble through before the patrolman returned. The building was separated from its neighbours to the sides and the Vltava River behind by narrow alleyways and a promenade wall. Ice squeaked under my boots, and my breath was a billowing wraith under the yellow streetlights. As I had predicted, there was a back door to Vasily's, down a short flight of steps, but the steel-reinforced door turned out to be locked tight. The wind stung my face and pried for the gaps in my clothing. I drank in the air through my nose, tasting the metallic odour of snow and the retreating fumes from Luddick's car. He was still using 4-star petrol. I chewed my lip, wondering if it was worth checking the nearby buildings, when a whiff of methane made me pause at the top of the stairs. Now there's an idea. After a few seconds of tramping around, I found what I was looking for. Excited, I felt around under the snow until I uncovered a metal hatch. It was awkward, but I managed to pry the cover loose with half-frozen fingers and heave it open. Cat-like, I let myself drop into the hole and pulled the hatch closed behind me. Maybe I'd get lucky, and the police patrol guy would suddenly decide to go for his break, rather than circle back and wonder why the hatch was suddenly free from snow. I hurried along in the fetid dark, my fingers never letting go of the wall as my eyes slowly adjusted. After only a few steps, the corridor branched and joined the sewers. I heard, rather than saw, the water directly in front of me. It lapped against the walkway with a shush, shush whisper. A charnel stench, mated grotesquely with the gases from the sewer, to create something that was almost solid. It was virtually identical to the same gut-curdling miasma I'd encountered at Wren's pawn shop. Falling in was not even to be contemplated. A short way up ahead, light spilled from a ruined hole in the wall. There were enough things floating in the sewer to make me regret the illumination, But with its help, I picked my way along and peered through the hole. Providence, it seemed, chose odd moments to make my life easier. I had been hoping to find a service door in the sewers to gain access to Vasily's cellars, but instead, a localized explosion had torn through the reinforced concrete wall. I stepped carefully through and edged around a steel cabinet that lay on its side, warped and buckled as though from intense heat. A few crusty paint pots had also been caught in the blast. Their contents splattered the brickwork with the lurid abandonment of modern art. A table and chair lay on their sides. Box files were scattered like giant Lego bricks, spilling their contents at random. I spotted the security door I'd seen from outside, surrounded on the inside by heavy-duty crates in various stages of unpacking. Papers covered most of the floor like autumn leaves. By the light of a stuttering fluorescent bulb, I found invoices for expensive antiquities and dozens of newspaper clippings, most of them with Monstrum featuring in their headlines. The art dealer, it seemed, had built up quite a store of information about his killer. My nostrils flared, and I had to suppress the urge to gag. It was as though the memory of violence had been stamped into every molecule of the air. Each breath felt like it was choking on calculated, inhuman malice. A radio lay face down at my feet, as though averting its gaze from the back wall. My gorge rose as I approached, the irrepressible stink growing, if possible, even worse. Familiar symbols had been smeared in blood across the wall, in the monstrum's gory signature. Crimson handprints traced a tortured pathway across the floor. There was a lot more blood here than at Von Croy's place. Evidently, Vasily had been conscious and struggling when the monstrum began gutting him. There were stairs leading out of the cellar. Mould glistened in the light cast by a single naked bulb. As I reached the top, the walls became plasterboard, painted a utilitarian grey, with stacks of antique picture frames leaning against them. I froze. Beyond a closed side door, from the end of the hallway, came an insect footfall, a whisper of paper shuffling against paper. I crept to the open doorway, my weapon loose and ready at my side. There was a cough, masculine and impatient, and I peeped through the doorframe. Standing with their back to me, a very familiar pair of shoulders stood hunched over a desk. The man's brutish, heavily scarred hands were rummaging through an open box file under the glow of a bottle green desk lamp. The man didn't notice me, but muttered curses in French under his breath, shifting his weight to the other foot. It was too good to be true. Bouchard never looked up as I closed the distance between us and pressed my pistol against his fat neck.
Groth!
Bouchard, how are things? I struck, catching his skull with the butt of my weapon. He stumbled, and I kicked him back into a chair, his head lolling. A bead of blood dripped from his scalp. He was groaning, barely conscious, but I felt no pity. When I hit someone, they usually stay down. Quickly I searched his pockets, disarming him of a palm-sized handgun. There was a packing case next to the desk, with a length of security chain and combination padlock to deter would-be thieves. In moments, I had looped the chain several times around Bouchard's unresisting arm and the nearby radiator. The padlock clicked, locking him in place. Like a bear rousing itself from hibernation, he shook his head, swaying as he returned to full consciousness. The crate bounced and thumped against the floor as I dragged it over and sat opposite him, crossing one ankle over my knee and holding my pistol with the safety catch on. I want some answers, Bouchard. Yes, I know you can hear me. Why did you want me dead in Paris?
You know, just a side issue. A loose end that needed tidying up.
Who ordered it?
A madman called Eckhart. He was putting pressure on all of my operations, threatening my family, killing my men. You remember Arnaud, eh? Imagine dealing with that every day.
Your typical psycho.
The worst kind. Eckhart is the monstron.
Is that right? Believe it or not, I had started to piece that together. What exactly did you do for him?
I had to take delivery of a painting that was in the Louvre and bring it to the Strahov here in Prague.
My painting? That wasn't easy to get out of the Louvre, Bouchard.
Seems everyone's a loser.
So, why Prague?
Eckhart is protected by a group based here, called the Cabal. They're almost as dangerous as Eckhart, and at least as insane.
The Cabal? Not the Mafia, then?
No. They are much more sinister than the Mafia. No one even knows how old they really are. But I've seen records suggesting they were active during the Second World War.
I had a brief mental image of a bunch of crackpot alchemists running around the city, and my mind skipped back to Ludwig's dossiers. Their singular oddness suddenly seemed to fit. A chill slipped into my belly, leaching the warmth from my innards. The idea that this Eckhart could be the fabled black alchemist, missing for 5 centuries, gained some plausibility. Killing his original cabal had not, apparently, given him any qualms about assembling a new one. Interesting.
Anyone too inquisitive about Cabal business simply disappears.
Like my friend Von Croy. What was his involvement in all of this? Why would the monstrum kill him?
He was hired to locate one of the 5 paintings that was in the Louvre, but he found out too much. He contacted Vasily here in Prague and they exchanged information.
I found Vasily's faxes, plus 4 obscure engravings he sent to Von Croy.
Proof that your friend got careless. The faxes were intercepted by the Cabal. Suddenly Eckhart didn't need Von Croy anymore. It was another loose end to be tidied up, like Vasily.
Killed like Vasily, you mean? Haven't you been downstairs? Haven't you seen how Vasily died? Why does Eckhart do that to the bodies, Bouchard?
I don't know the details, but it's something to do with reviving the cubiculum Nephilim.
My confusion lasted mere moments. Then in a rush of images, my subconscious hurled through my memories and back to a disused tram in the middle of a Parisian slum, to the pages of Werner's notebook, open on my lap in the light of dawn some 36 hours ago. The sleeper, or cubiculum Nephilim, literally sleeping cask or chamber of the Nephilim, thought to be the last intact specimen of the Nephilim race. Supposedly buried in Anatolia, Turkey. It was as though a laser beam had switched on in my head, connecting the facts into one coherent beam. What had been fragmented theories and notes began linking up into a pattern. One whose final details were still unclear, but whose silhouette was terrifying. The sleeper. Last of the extinct Nephilim race. What the hell is Eckhart doing with that?
You heard of the sleeper? Eckhart is insane! He thinks he can use the sleeper to breathe the Nephilim back into existence!
There's no faulting his ambition, is there? So this 5th engraving Vasily kept back is the key to the last obscura painting Eckhart's after.
Clever girl. The engraving shows a location called the Vault of Trophies. The vault was one of the last Lux Veritatis secret strongholds, and Eckhart's been desperate to get into it.
And just how do you know all this, Bouchard? I doubt most Parisian gang bosses take much of an interest in biblical legends.
Information is survival. I'm a survivor. Not unlike you, eh?
So do you know where the vault is located?
Only that it's somewhere beneath the storehouse.
And the painting is definitely there.
Eckhart thinks so. It's one of the reasons the Cabal built their stronghold there in the first place.
Well then, I better take a look around and find this engraving, hadn't I?
It'll be well done. Vasily was very cautious.
Not cautious enough.
Are you going to leave me like this?
Yes. Take a break, Bouchard. You've been running around a lot. I'll be back with the 5th engraving. Don't worry. I won't be long.
In episode 10 of Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, Lara Croft was played by J.R. Millward. Thomas Luddick and Louis Bouchard were played by Adam Coover. Written and adapted by J.R. Millward. Based on an original story by A. Murty Schofield. With music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Additional sound effects courtesy of www.freesfx.co.uk, the BBC and the YouTube Audio Library. Produced by Stephen Millward. Lara Croft and Tomb Raider are the property of Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix.